Hello, everyone. This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engage Podcast, to bring you today another episode of Engage Podcast. But before we can get into that, I have to give you my world-famous announcements. If you are listening for the very first time, I just want to say welcome. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, wherever, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you can get notified every time we come out with a new episode of Engage Podcast. You won't have to look for us. You won't have to type us in the search bar. It's going to be on your phone waiting for you to listen every single Thursday. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, go over to our YouTube page where you can see today's episode live. You can see it happening in real time. You get to see the guests. You get to be a fly on the wall, or you get to feel like you're sitting at the table with us. It's a really cool experience, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people who've said that it has improved their experience listening to Engage Podcast. So if you are on our YouTube page, go ahead and like and subscribe. That way you can get notified every time we come out with Engage Podcast and also our other different pieces of content. So we have our Sunday morning services that are streamed in real time on Sundays at 11 a.m. We also have music review videos, devotionals, any kind of thing you possibly can think of, book review videos. It's all on our YouTube page. And the link for that's down in the show notes, and you can go right there and check it out. It's going to be, it's kind of cool. So our guest today, this is his second time on the show. And the first time he was on was an experience. And I say that because there's no other word I can think of to describe what that first interview was like. His name is Jeff Linn. So Jeff Linn is an incredible individual. They say that the greatest people you'll ever meet are not in Hollywood. They're not on Capitol Hill. They're just down the street from you. That's exactly what I think of when I hear and meet Jeff Linn. He is just an incredible individual. And if you listen to his first interview last year, then you already know that. If you haven't heard that episode, I advise you to go listen to it as well as listen to this episode, because you just find out more about what makes him tick, what makes him the very special individual that he is. He is the most caring, compassionate, just the kind of person that I want to be, that I want to emulate and learn from. So it was a great opportunity to have him on the show again. So give it up for our friend, Jeff Linn.
Podcast. I am so excited to have back on the show Mr. Jeff Linn. Now, just a little about Jeff. Jeff is the Foundation Building Materials Project Manager, and I know things are going well there. But Jeff also has something that he runs that I know he loves. It's close to his heart. It's called Above and Beyond Navigational Coaches. Now, if you want to find out more about those things, we had Jeff on before, and his podcast was great. It was well loved, got a lot of views. You're a pretty dynamic guy. So I say all that to say that if you want to re-listen to that, Seth, you will provide the link for folks to listen to, right?
Right. If you're watching on YouTube, the link's up there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or whatever, it's down in the show notes.
Okay. So today we want to have a follow-up, because before you couldn't see Jeff. Now you can see him. He's got his really cool Peaky Blinder hat on. He got nervous, like I was going to take it off there. I noticed that. I'm not taking the hat off, right? But the other thing is we want to drill down a little bit. So we're not going to talk as much about those things because we feel like we've covered them. So here we have a list of specific questions that we thought would be nice to ask ask you. So again, part of our goal today is not just to bring on the best of the best and people that are dynamic and are trying to do something really neat in our community and for the world, but we also want the folks out there to be inspired. Okay, so hopefully some of this leads to some self-reflection in your own life as you listen. All right, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
So here are some of the questions. We're just going to start off with number one and go right through these. These are in no specific order. All right?
Okay.
All right, so here we go. What are you better at than most anyone else in the world?
Well, I really don't consider myself better than anyone, to be honest, and I think that's something that, you know, your parents and your pastors and different people talk to you about on Saturdays and just those life lessons. So I really don't. The way I see it, though, is we have the ability to work harder and make better choices than maybe other people. And I would consider one of the things that I do pretty well, and I learned this from my mom at a really early age, was the ability to express gratitude. So when I was 6 years old, my mom started, and she was pretty hard on me in regards to, you must write thank you notes. And she actually taught me how to write thank you notes when I was really young. And that resonated throughout the rest of my life. And so I'm going to be 43, and I continue to this day. I wrote one last night, and I write them every week to people. And every human that we meet every week of our life, they're going to touch us in different ways, right? And it's important for us to let them know how they've touched us. So I think the one thing that I do pretty well is express my gratitude on paper toward other people.
So do you have a time in the week set aside for that? Like every Thursday morning from 9 to 10, that's when I clear off my schedule, I go get my notes, and I write?
No, as life is, it's pretty random. So last evening, my mother-in-law, she is a seamstress, and you know, me being as tall as I am, that's a joke. I'm 5'4". Every pair of pants that I own has to be hemmed. So this week's one thank you note was simply letting her know that I really appreciate the time and energy that she puts into that. So it's more random than anything else, but I enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Yeah, I like that. The book of Proverbs, there's a great verse, and I'm going to off the cuff it here. It says, "The generous man will be prosperous, and he that waters will himself be watered." Okay?
That's a good off the cuffer, Anthony. Wow.
I just pretended like I didn't have it memorized to seem humble. So, the generous man will be prosperous. He that waters will himself be watered. So, how I have a visual with that, in that everyone's walking around with like a canteen, a bucket of water, right? And the generous man will be prosperous. He that waters will himself be watered. Every time you're given an opportunity in life to water someone else, right? And the more positive things you can shower on somebody, then the Bible actually says that the chances are that that person's going to turn around and be generous with you. And Zig Ziglar, off the cuff, also said, the best way to meet your goals is by helping someone else meet theirs.
That's right.
Right? And it's the same idea. He that waters will himself be watered. So if you're out helping other people, the chances are high that they're going to turn around when you need help and help you. Now, a lot of motives go into that, but, if you're doing it from a good place, then I think that's a great, tangible thing to be known for. So, very cool.
Well, I think another thing that proverb says a lot too is not just that they're going to help you, but that you yourself are going to get, like, your soul will be watered by helping somebody else. In fact, the age-old saying is the fastest way to get through depression is by helping someone. Right. Because doing a careless act purely just for the sake of just helping that person, or loving someone for the sake of loving them, it does something to your soul that really just keeps you going, keeps you alive. And that's the thing that I think, I know myself, along with the listeners, when you were on the podcast last time, I got to, and I'm going to use this word very specifically, I got to experience Jeff Linn for the first time, and one of the things that I was blown away by, and that it was a cool experience, was that selflessness, that generosity is 100%. Like, I would use those two words to describe who you are, and just how you talk to me and Pastor Anthony, and how you talk about helping other people. That's something that not only does our world desperately need, but people need to learn that, just as I won't even say a skill, because I'm looking at my generation specifically, and there's a lot of people, including myself, who it was always about us getting what we want out of life or out of a relationship, not about what we can give. And that was why, like, to me, one of the biggest eye opener was, I was reading a biography of Wilde. What's the poet's name?
Oscar
Wilde. And at the end of his life, he asked I guess it was his lover, a question. He said, out of all the people you've ever loved, how many of them did you love for their sake? And that was when, like, he realized that all of his entire life was wrapped up in always himself. Even the people he loved, it was because he was getting something out of it. And that when you love someone for their sake, not yours, that's how a person's life really gets transformed, and how their legacy can be left. So that's awesome.
Thanks, Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Ready to move on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Has
I'll add to that, though,
Yeah.
briefly, just what Seth said. And I think now is a really important time in our world's history, too, for our children and our children's friends and our nieces, nephews, whomever the children are in our lives, that they need to witness their parents, aunts, uncles, coaches, mentors, whoever these people are in their lives. They need to witness them doing these things. Whether it's the random act of kindness where you're taking socks over to your elderly neighbor just because it's freezing cold, and you're letting them know you're thinking about them in the dead of winter when they don't have much other family alive. So those types of things I think our world really needs, and it's really cool to see how it resonates in little children's hearts and minds when they start to see mom and dad, and they start to see aunts, uncles, friends, they start to see these acts in motion. Next thing you know, they have their pen and paper, and they're writing their first thank you note when they're 4 or 5. And then it becomes habitual to them, and then they decide later on in life if they want to continue that and make it a habit in their lives.
How did that become something that your mom was doing? Like, how did that happen?
I think my mom was always, she's a very selfless person, so she was always thinking about other humans. And so that part of my mom came to me as a gift. And so ever since I was very, very young, I can probably remember 4 or 5, my mom watching her write thank you letters and thank you notes to people. And then once I was able to write, guess what I was doing for Christmas and all the holidays and my birthday? I was writing 25 thank you notes, to whoever was kind or ever did anything.
That's excellent. Now, your mom is she Italian by chance?
She is not.
She's not. Do you want to know how I know? How I know she's not Italian?
How do you know that?
Because do you know how Italian people give thank you notes?
Yes.
With meatball sandwiches. We just have a different version of saying thank you.
Yeah,
it's always with food. I like that there's something tangible there. You know that? It's crystal clear. It's not confusing. This is your thing, and now you pass it on to your kids. I like it.
Thanks.
Do you have a superpower? And if so, what is it?
I have none, but if I could have one, it would be speak all languages. So you could go anywhere in the world and you could speak whatever language and understand whatever language. I think that would be incredible. And then obviously everybody's, transport yourself to any place, anytime, anywhere. That would be extremely cool. But I would say my reality power, like real world power, would be just keeping people together. Like your high school friends or your college friends or even your family for that matter. Life pulls people apart for various reasons. And I've always tried my best to be the glue that holds people together. And whether that means a friend gets PO'd at another friend, or someone, is angry about something that someone said, I've always tried my best to try to pull those people back together, if able.
Very
So
cool.
try to glue people together.
Jesus speaks about that in Matthew 5, in the Beatitudes. He says, blessed are the peacemakers. And there's a difference between being a peacemaker and peacekeeper.
Yep.
A peacemaker is sometimes very ugly work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say the other small thing to go off that reality power would just be making healthy choices each day. Making choices that are positive, healthy, loving, for myself and for others. So,
What's an example of that?
I would say just use food as an example, right? The choices that I make are I try to make them as selfless as I can possibly make them, so that I can live longer and be there for my kids longer. So, using the information that I've learned and developed over the course of my life, I try the best I can to make good, healthy food choices, to inspire health in other people and myself, and just kind of just be an example. Again, goes back to the thank you notes. It's when they see the work in action, then people start to ask questions. And I don't think it's up to us to stand on top of the mountain and talk about it, but if people ask, would love to be able to help them with those things. So I really enjoy being able to make those healthy, habitual choices, because once they do become habit, no matter what it is, then you got it. Then you know that you can continue to do it over and over again, and it can take you to that place that you want to go, or it can take you to the place you don't want to go.
Yeah. So what would you say is one misconception that people have about you?
That's a good question. I would say through the course of my life, when folks see individuals that maybe try to live a healthy lifestyle, or they could think that people might be extremely vain, like vain, cocky, whatever. The other thing is maybe not well read. When you hear wrestling coach, or you hear the types of career fields that people have, sometimes people form misconceptions that maybe he's vain, or maybe he doesn't understand things, or maybe he's not that intelligent. I do ask people that, though, and I'm glad you asked this question, because I say to my kids, I said it the other morning, what's it like to be on the other side of me?
That's a great question.
What's it like to be on the other side of me? Because I think one way about myself, but I don't know how you think. I don't know how you think. You might say, this guy's a real jerk, Well, I want my kids to tell me, like, Dad, what can I do? How can I improve? And then my daughter looks at me as like, Daddy, well, you could be a little bit more patient, or you could get on the floor with us and a little bit more. And so what that does is it also helps me reflect. And helps me grow, and how I can shift and maneuver. So I would say that would be just some misconceptions, but I really enjoy hearing from people that I care about and people that I don't know very well what it's like to be on the other side of me.
So on that note, what is one piece of feedback that someone has given you when you've asked that question, or maybe when you didn't ask that question? What's the most meaningful piece of feedback you've ever received, and how did you handle that?
Well, I'd say I'd have a few. One would stem back about 10 plus years, and I was in the midst of a report for our vice president when I worked at Teal College, and I remember being uber focused on what I was supposed to do, and I remember feeling the pressure mount, and then I remember the door opened, and it was one of the people that I managed, and I remember vividly, he came in and I wasn't focused on him. Like, I was half there, right? And he needed me at the time. I didn't know that he needed me at the time, but he needed me at the time. And so what did I do? I went back to what I thought was most important, which was the report that needed done in an hour, right? So months went by, year ends, and I always would ask that question, you know, what can I do to improve on as your manager, leader, whatever. And he brought that moment up, that he felt so unimportant. And from that moment in my life, I realized that the people in the room, we have to give them the utmost of love and importance, no matter what, because we don't know what they're going through. And he needed me that day, and I wasn't there for him. That day. And so I tried to flip the switch in my own brain and heart to focus on listening. And this is one I do have trouble with, is listening more than talking. And I continue to work on that one. But that was a really strong life lesson for me. That day in my office, needed me, discounted them, went on to what I thought was most important, which was the human in front of me. And so that was a really good life lesson. The other one I would say was, you know, don't always assume the worst. Don't make assumptions. And don't take things so personally. The younger I was, I would take a lot of things personally. And I've learned to kind of fluff those off and realize that it's not about me. This has nothing to do with me. So I can't take it personally. I can't assume the worst. I'm going to try to assume the best. And then if the worst happens, then I'm going to forgive, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to push forward. But I think that's some life lessons that I've learned. And my recent lesson that I've learned was the vice president of our company at Foundation Building Materials. Him and I were talking. We talk about life and things like that. And he said to me one time, you know, don't ever burn a bridge. Find a way to not let that bridge burn. If you can't, some are going to burn. We know that. But find and fight for a way to not let it burn. And if you do mess up, try to circle back. Try to circle back. So that was good wisdom that he provided me when we recently talked. So I think that's awesome that we have the opportunity to kind of learn from people and sometimes hearing things we don't want to hear.
I mentioned to Amy on Sunday in passing, and you joked with her. I said, wherever you are, be there.
Yeah.
Right? I don't remember who said that. I think it was Abe Lincoln, but, you know, he gets ascribed every quote. If you don't know who said it, it's Abe Lincoln.
Yeah. Abe said it.
Abe, if it's wise, yeah, like, oh, yeah, Lincoln definitely said that, but it's true. Wherever you are, be there. I struggle with that, not as much now. I'm not perfect in that by any means, but I think being younger, and I remember someone called me out at my first church, sort of like how that guy did, but they did it there, and it wasn't done in a mean way, but they called me out. They said something about you're always jittery, and I am, but I was even more so then. And I remember thinking, I have to actually talk to my feet. That's what I do. I still do that to this day. Like when church is done, when people go through the line, I actually talk to my feet and I tell them to stand still, because it gives the impression, you know, your feet are shifting all over the place because there's this nervous energy going on in me. But for somebody walking through the line, the impression is you want to leave, you want to talk to that person, you're focused over there, even though I'm not. I'm giving that impression, you know, that I'm not really there. I'm shifting all over the place. And so I talk to my feet every Sunday. And I'll talk to my feet every once in a while when I'm in a group, and I'll tell them, stand still. So I'll focus and just tell my feet to stay like glued. Like I imagine there's a magnet on the bottom of my feet down into the earth so that I stand still. So, I don't know.
So to kind of piggyback off of that, one of the little things that you said that just real quick is you said that you learn not to take things so personal.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say majority of my life, my biggest issue was I always assumed when there was a comment that, like, when my brain heard it, it didn't automatically come up as positive. My brain always assumed there was negative intent behind an action, just something that someone said. And it has been a huge struggle for me to get out of that, because you do it for so long, your brain's wired that way, it's really hard to reprogram it. So, how did you get from that place where you took things personally to now you've gotten better at not taking things so personally?
I would say just through experience, a little bit of a sense of humor, and then ultimately the empathetic side of myself, just putting myself in that other person's shoes, and then quickly saying, as my fist is clenching or as I'm, getting really angry, I start to think, like, I have no clue what that human's going through right now. Like, they could have just lost their son. They could have just lost,
Yeah.
We all go through these trials, tribulations in our life, and we just try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So that's what I do. That really helps me through it, to not be as assuming. And certainly if I even do assume, I kind of slap myself in the face and say, dude, don't take it personally either.
Right.
Because you just don't know what's coming from. Yeah. So you have to take it in and throw it right back out into the universe and be done with it. So that's really helped me out, is like quick, swift removal of it. Kind of like you're just taking it out of the trash and you're dragging the trash and you leave it out there. Done.
That's cool.
So that's helped me out a lot, because I wasn't always like that. I was more drama filled the younger I was, and I would let things just fester.
Around what age did that switch start for you?
I would say in my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you're in your 20s, you think you know everything, and you really know nothing. You kind of have to be retrained on life,
Yeah.
Do you know how old Jesus was when he started his public ministry?
Yeah, wasn't he?
He was 30.
30, yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I think there's a reason for that, right?
Incredible.
So something happens to a guy around 30. Most, not all. Some people that remain immature their whole life, right? But I think something happens around that age where you become a little more mature.
See, for me, it was actually, I did a interview, and for me, like, the biggest like light bulb, like the penny drop moment, was when I watched myself talk to somebody else, and there were so many times where, based on my face expression or just even tone of voice, I was like, I'd say to myself, "Wow, that sounded rude," and that's when I realized, oh, you know what? There are some times that you don't realize that, the way you say something, or a facial expression, or even something you didn't say, could be taken as a negative intent. And that's, to me, that was when I realized, oh, okay, if I do that, if I just watch myself do that, and I catch myself doing it on here all the time too, as I'm video editing, I'm like, like, why did you say that, Seth? Or why didn't you not say that? That's when I realized, oh, everybody does it. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean, even if someone like outright accidentally offends you, it doesn't mean that they intended to offend you. And there's another part too where, and this is something that I'm learning just within the last couple of years, is that if you don't like the reflection, then don't change the mirror, right? Change yourself looking in the mirror. So if someone brings up something that you don't necessarily like, what you don't want to hear, you have to ask yourself the question: is what they're saying right? And if it's blatantly wrong, and and people around you would say it's wrong, then just throw it out. Who cares? Yeah. But if it is,
can you repeat that last phrase again?
Whatever. Who cares?
But this is a little inside joke we have. Apparently, I have mannerisms. And one of them is
his watch. His watch.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Big deal.
Who cares? He always is flipping his watch around. So anytime I have ever gone to him for,
I don't have my watch on.
I was gonna say it's not on today.
Advice, he always just goes, Seth, who cares? Who cares?
I gotta tell him, so what? Big deal. Who cares?
In fact,
this is one of the benefits of them watching this today. Before they heard it, now they see it. Big deal.
Big deal. Who cares?
So what?
So one, where's the watch? And two, why do you have it so loose where it's smooth?
There used to be a photo on his Facebook. He took it down. It was him talking to someone at like a party, and it was him mid wrist flip. His wrist and the watch was blurry because the person took it as he was flipping it.
Right? And if there was a little caption, it would have said,
"Oh my gosh,
who cares?"
That is funny.
But
That's for now the listeners are like, oh, now I know what's going on when I don't see what's going on.
But you love your watch, though. That's the moral.
I love my watches. Plural. I'm a watch
just
guy.
like his colognes.
Oh, just like my colognes, which, by the way, I have now influenced him to get into colognes.
Really?
Yeah.
Seth, what are some of your early choices in the cologne game?
So my thing is I don't know the names. I'm not anywhere close to being like how into it as Pastor Anthony is. But like the light blue by
Dolce & Gabbana.
Yep, that's always a favorite of mine. I still have, in fact, my brother actually just gave it back to me, a bottle of Ed Hardy cologne.
Oh, Ed Hardy.
Yeah, and so I was like, it was also one of those things too, because I must have left it at my parents' house when I moved out. This is like 7, 8, actually probably more like 9 years ago. And it was like about halfway full, and he gave it back to me. It was in a box, and he's like, "Hey, when we were moving, my mom and dad found this box that has a bunch of your stuff in it." So I took it out and I sprayed it, and like all these memories of high school came back. When I was dating my now wife, it was so I spray that now, and it's more for just. But so that Ed Hardy, the light blue. And then you got me onto another. Again, I don't know the names. I just know they smell good. And then my father-in-law just gave me a couple bottles too. So
he's working his way up. I know you're a fragrance guy, too.
I do enjoy some.
We do like fragrances. If you like fragrances out there, drop us a comment. Tell us what you're wearing right now.
Love to hear it.
Cologne, not clothes. Cologne.
Cologne.
That sounded weird.
Fragrance.
You know who had the best cologne? Brian Fantana. From the Anchorman. Remember when his collection, his drawer opened up and they all came out and he had them all lined up, and then each day he would wear it.
I'm sure there's a knockoff of that somewhere out there.
There probably is. Absolutely. Money to be made, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. That's actually who I think about, because when you took me to the country club that one time, you opened up your locker and you had a whole thing of cologne. You took me to your house and in your bathroom, a whole thing of cologne. You have cologne in your car. You have cologne in your office. You have cologne in the bathroom. You have cologne.
He's even put cologne in the oil diffusers.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
There's cologne before you got here. You came out of the bathroom. You're like, what bathroom in church has gel and hair cologne and hairspray?
It's like a mini country club.
You guys are a riot. You guys are a riot, I'll tell you. All right, let's get back to this guy, okay?
Sorry.
So, no, that's good. Part of this is just finding out about us as regular people, right?
Right.
So tell us about the first job you had that it's not in your resume, and what did you learn from that experience?
First job that I had, I was 15, and actually, now that you say it, I should probably slap it back on my resume, because it was probably one of the most interesting, fun jobs I've ever had. So have you ever heard of the term Sand Pro? Sand Pro?
No.
So what a Sand Pro is, it's like a tractor, and it has a drop-down lever, so you pull the lever, and the back of the Sand Pro drops down into the sand trap on the golf course. And it's a very long rake. And all it does is you drive it in the sand bunker, and you make nice little paths, and you make the sand trap look really nice. So I worked at a golf course, and it was a really nice Jack Nicklaus golf course. And so at 5 a.m, when I was 15, I had to be ready to rock. And my Sand Pro was there waiting for me, and I jumped on it, and I thought it was the best thing ever. And I would go to all 18 holes, and we had huge sand bunkers. And so I'd rake them with the Sand Pro, and then I would get off the Sand Pro, and then I would take the hand rake that I had, and we'd edge all around every bunker.
Oh, wow.
So that job for me was outstanding. It was a life lesson that, one, you got to get up early. So that taught me a lot about that. It taught me a lot about understanding how expensive it is to maintain a golf course. And then I moved on to cutting greens and tees, and we had one green at the course that was over $1 million. So we had to make sure that our errors were minimum, because we had the members, and a lot of the members of the golf course were Mario Lemieux and guys that were Pittsburgh Penguins and Pittsburgh Steelers and those guys. So the margin of error had to be very, very low.
No pressure.
No. So that was a high pressure job for basically no money, and you had to get up really early. And you get to meet a lot of really neat people. So, again, it was about the people that I met And that job just taught me so much about life, and you just got to get up. Like, that's how you start, right? You start the day, and I was 15, and I had to get up really, really early and get on that dang Sand Pro. And some days I wish I had a Sand Pro around here.
I was just, like, my wife makes fun of me because I'm all about the perfect lines when I cut grass.
Oh, yes.
Because I drive past the golf course, the Newcastle Avalon, and I always envy the way that their grass looks. And so my wife always joked that she's like, for how obsessive you are about those lines, it's really the only, like, it's the only thing besides maybe books on a bookshelf, like, this is driving me nuts, that I'm like OCD about. And so that job of making the grooves in the sand, that would just be, because it's pure bliss and just satisfying.
Yeah.
And like something you can look back on and you just feel so fulfilled.
Absolutely.
That would be an amazing job.
I hear you. And the greens were even better. So you'd stare down at the trapper, you'd stare over at the green, and you just feel like, wow, I did a pretty good job today. Or you'd be like, oh my gosh, I gotta fix that because that outing's starting and I kind of muffed out. So
would they call you out on things like that?
Oh, they were very. So our superintendent of the golf course he was a Penn State alum, and he was meticulous on everything. So the second cuts of the greens had to be perfect, and that's where you make your mistakes. So when you have your green cutter, we did them by hand too, which was different. They were so big. So when it comes down, when the blades come down, sometimes they come down a little bit faster, and it'll like make that nick, a little nick in the green. So you had to be really cautious as to when that blade hit. So it was a learned skill, but one in which taught me patience and dedication and time management.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
And I'm sure details to the little things too.
Absolutely. That was a good question.
So if you could magically create one product to fix something that our world needs, what product would you be? And what would that product be?
Well, if we're talking products right now in this day and age, or things, I would hope that the invention of a cure for cancer and these viruses and things that ravage our world, obviously that would be the first and foremost. Things that you see pull people's lives apart. I would like to see those be out in the market. So that would be first and foremost. But if you're talking about like an invention of something, maybe go back to the movie, because you guys are movie buffs. Maybe go back to like Doc Brown and Back to the Future. When he made the garbage of the DeLorean. So he put the garbage in the DeLorean and made the DeLorean run on the garbage. So you look at waste. Right? Look at all of our waste in our world. And as you drive up to Erie, you see the big mound of garbage. And everywhere you go in the world, there's garbage everywhere. It'd be cool if we could find a way to use that as fuel, because we know what fuel does to the environment and what it does to our own bodies. And so I would say go back and try to figure out a way to harness our garbage to make things operate.
What would you create?
Yeah,
what would you try to fix?
Say, what would you guys do?
Oh, I don't know. That's tough. Here, you go first.
Well, I didn't give any thought to this until I literally just said it to you right now. New cologne. My first one was a joke, and that's a muzzle. I mean, joking as in not that it doesn't need done, but joking and there are more important things. But that was my first answer, a muzzle. The second would be somehow to feed everybody so that there's nobody hungry. And I don't know how, like, you got huge conveyor belts going all over the place. I don't know. But that would be something that I think is immediate, because at the end of the day, it's like the hierarchy of needs. I mean, if you're hungry and you're starving, nothing else matters. So that would probably be something that I would want to invent.
I would have this, I don't know. It's such a tough question. Honestly, I think if I could pick one thing, obviously a cure for cancer it's up there, right? But another thing that I think about on a daily basis, it's like, man, I wish there was something I wish there was like a pill or like something like an Advil that it would stop. It would allow people to hear feedback or criticism, or to hear what everybody else in the room is thinking, without them immediately going to the defensive about it. Mm-hmm. I wish, because I know that there are some drugs that when you take, it can lower stress, it can lower anxiety. I wish there was something that someone could take, and I don't want to say have a intervention, but like that a one-on-one moment where they're sitting with people in the room and people are saying, you really need to fix this part of your life, because you could be at a much better potential if you were to fix this. Because again, this is something that I've just realized in the last year, maybe 2 years, is that a lot of my problems just come from issues with personality that went unnoticed for so many years. And while I sit here and say, I wish someone when I was 17 would have told me that, I know for a fact if someone did tell me that, one, I wouldn't have listened to, I probably would have they would have been dead to me. So I wish that there was something that allowed people to kind of put that feeling away. Yeah.
It would almost be great to have like a mentor network of humans that could just sit around and just provide that brutally honest opinions, feedbacks, where you take it with a grain of salt, but also you understand that it's coming from a great place. Yeah. That someone has your best interest in mind, and I think that's what we all need. We all need that at different parts of our lives. And I remember it when I was 18. I had a guy that told me, he said, "Listen," he's like, "you're an extrovert, and you're not a 4.0 student. And you should probably consider these careers." But he was honest with me, right? He knew me enough to tell me those things, and I think that's the hard part too, is how many people are going to really sit down with you and have those, as you mentioned earlier, these difficult conversations. So you kind of, again, you have to ask, what's it like to be on the other side of me, and let people unload on you. If that's what we're looking for, and it helps us grow. Sure. Sometimes it could knock us down a few pegs. Mm-hmm. But I think it could be good.
Well, anytime you treat a wound, right, it's working by how painful it is. Right. That's what my mom always told me, which is why to this day I still use brown Listerine. Yeah, because my mom used to always tell me if it doesn't burn, it's not working.
Yeah, the original Listerine. My dad's an all original person. He buys everything original. But just thinking biblically about that, they say that you should always have there should always be a Barnabas, a Paul, and a Timothy in your life. So like there was Barnabas is in the middle, and or no, Paul's in the middle, and then Paul has Timothy underneath him, and he's guiding him as a disciple, but then Barnabas is standing above Paul, guiding him as a disciple. So there should be always, if you're standing here, there should always be a Timothy, in other words, someone you're investing in, but there should always be someone that's on top of you investing in you. I've been lucky because, my role at my first church was the associate assistant, and a lot of times people are reluctant to be as blatant with the pastor, but in my role they were not. And people were brutally honest, whether I wanted it or not. And at first, I really would make me mad. But the key is when I found the people that I could trust them, that they loved me, and they had good intentions for me, that was the key. Then that was a game changer for me. I would seek them out, and we would start meeting on a regular basis. And they were brutally honest, but in a way that helped me in more ways than I would give them the 100% the biggest reasons for the reasons who I am and where I've come is directly from those people investing in me. So
that's cool.
All right, so let's think about school. We all have, I guess, high school education behind us. Did you graduate?
High school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got kicked out in like 8th grade or something.
Said you should have saw your face right there, just for a split half a millisecond.
I was like,
Did you get expelled, kicked out?
I
What was the
did.
story?
I got suspended twice in my high school career. Based up on my high school GPA, it was a miracle that I graduated. I'll just put it this way. The school that I was at in St. Louis was a very difficult school. A lot of the people who graduated from Clayton High, shout out to Clayton High in St. Louis, went on to Harvard, a lot of Ivy League schools. And when I got to Newcastle was I'm not saying anything bad about Newcastle. It was just a very easy, compared to that, a very easy school to be a part of. And I thank God for that, because that gave me some GPA boost, because if I would have continued that route, I honestly would probably have to have redone my senior year, because I was not a good student at all. And so that's why I thought, I'd never told you that. So when he said, "Did you graduate?" I was like, oh, did not know I told you that.
No, I was just
now the
joking
whole world
around.
knows.
So much of school is about conformity, right? You got to do this at this time, go to this class at this time, hand this in at this time. It's just about you following a list of do's and don'ts and checking off things. What's one thing that you learned in school but had to unlearn afterward in the real world?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the things that we learn once we're in the real world, we're not applying a lot of those things to our jobs or our lives as parents, or, But I would think that some of the things that you have to reteach yourself goes back to what you said earlier, Seth, which is very early in the podcast, was, being like selfless and understanding that, because when we graduate, and I think you mentioned it, 17, 18, we're the most selfish jerks out there in some regards, and we have to kind of reteach ourselves, humility, patience, serving others, serving God, all those things. And so when, even college kids, they're 20, 21, 22, we send them off into the world, and then we have to reteach them all the things that they probably should have learned when they were younger with their parents. So to go back on that, I think a lot of it, we certainly do learn a lot in school from teachers, mentors, and people, but a lot of that comes in the home and what our families have taught us, and those are the lessons that, we're talking about today. It's not the math that you didn't want to do, Seth, or the science that I despised,
Or the anything that I didn't do.
So it's but you know what? You said conformity, and weirdly enough, for my side Y, which is the navigational coaching business, I spoke to a young man last month, and I asked him, I said, so what do you like about school? And he said, with the funniest tone, he goes, absolutely nothing. He said, they mandate us to be here. Now, mind you, this young man's going to probably be at like RIT or an Ivy League school, so he's brilliant. But the wires haven't connected for him. He thinks of it as a conforming mandate. He doesn't see the learning or the values. And I think for a lot of young kids, that's kind of where we all were in some ways with school. For some children that are gifted and intelligent, they show up every day and they can get the A, right? That's how my daughter is. That's not how my son is. My son's going to have to work. He's going to have to fight. We're going to have to talk about it, why hard work means something really. And I was that guy too, where it didn't just come easy. So I think kids have to learn that in school, though, and learn that selflessness. But not all schools conform to teach that.
Excellent. This isn't something that was sent to you. So before we close off, I want to ask you a question about your faith. Okay, how important is faith in your life and as a dad and being a role model?
I think that, just thinking about, and again, I think I said the last time, like, I'm a work in progress. I'm bruised, broken like everybody else. But, there are parts of the Bible that get etched in my heart, and I think it's Romans, and we've all sinned, and we've all fallen drastically short for the glory of God, and we're going to continue to do that every day, as parents, as humans, as friends, as sons. Like, I just thought about it on the way over here, the drive. I was like, I suck as a son. Like, I haven't talked to my mom in like 4 days, and so when I get in the car, I'm going to call my mom. So I think faith is extremely important the older we get, and the more life throws fireballs at us. And I just pray and I hope every day that with my kids, when we're praying grace and when we're praying at night, that some of the things that we talk about trickle into their hearts and their minds, and that they make that choice when they have the time, when they become of age, to accept their faith and live a life that has purpose, passion, and meaning, and not just to be a good human, but be on a mission. Like, what's your mission? And it's one thing to just say you're on a mission, but it's another thing to, like, run after that mission. And I think we all have to find what we talked about in the last episode that I was in, which is our why, and help our kids find their why, and help our friends find their why, and whatever it may be, every nook and cranny or avenue of their life, we have our whys, and how we can help people get there. That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Very cool way to end the show. I appreciate you being here. I know Seth appreciates you being here.
You guys are good eggs.
Thank you. I heard him talking in the hallway about how much of an impact you made on his life, and that's why we wanted to circle back and have you back on and dig a little deeper. We know that you have a lot to offer for everyone that you come in contact with. Now, hopefully, your circle can get even larger. We want to inspire people. So, listen, if you've been blessed by today's podcast, we would ask that you would like and subscribe, and we hope to see you next week. This is Anthony, Pastor at Faith, Jeff Linn, and Seth Walters signing off.
Have a great day, everyone.